Sometimes when stars rise quickly, they fall just as fast. Veronica Lake was one of the brightest stars in Hollywood during the 1940s with her famous peekaboo hairstyle. However, she would end up dying in obscurity at the age of 50. How did she go from a big Hollywood movie star to working in a dive bar and performing in dinner theater? Today we'll talk about whatever happened to Veronica Lake, her rise to fame, her tumultuous years in Hollywood, and her years of survival away from the spotlight. Before Veronica was Veronica, she was born Constance Connie Okelman on November 14th, 1922, in New York City. Her father, Harry, worked on a ship for an oil company and unfortunately died in an industrial explosion when Connie was about 10 years old. Her mother, also named Constance, would remarry the next year to a man by the name of Anthony KEANE. This would be the first of her name changes, from Connie Okelman to Connie KEANE. The family would soon move to Miami for Connie's high school years. According to her mother, Connie was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic while in high school, but refused treatment for the condition. While this diagnosis is possible, its accuracy is questionable at best, but it would explain some of her behavior later in life. At her mother's urging, Connie soon began entering local Florida beauty contests. She didn't think she was very talented, so her talent was pulling off a dress suggestively to reveal a bathing suit underneath. I guess it worked to a degree, especially in 1938 when at the age of 16 she entered the Miss Miami pageant. According to the Miami News, before the contest, Connie announced to the other contestants that she was sorry, but she was going to win. After she ended up coming in third, she told them that it didn't matter anyway because she was going to Hollywood. Well, as it turns out, she did end up going to Hollywood anyway, as her mother was eager for her daughter to graduate to motion pictures. The Keane family packed their bags, drove cross country, and arrived in Hollywood on July 4th, 1938. Connie enrolled in MGM's acting school, the Bliss Hayden School of Acting, which is now the Beverly Hills Playhouse. From there, she ended up in a few background roles for RKO and had a small role in Sorority House in 1939. Her part ended up being cut from the movie, but it was enough for her to want to continue acting and for her mother to push her further. She then had a few more small roles, including All Women Have Secrets in 1939, Dancing Coed also in 1939, and 40 Little Mothers in 1940. These small parts attracted interest from Paramount for her to play a nightclub singer in the military drama I Wanted Wings. Her signature look was cemented in this film when her hair accidentally fell over one eye, creating the peekaboo look. It's not clear whether this was on purpose or just a coincidence, but it would become the look which she would be known for. Now that she had her look, she was on her way to becoming a star, except one thing was missing: the star name. According to her, the name was changed without warning. The studio had picked the first name Veronica for her classic features, and the last name Lake for the coolness people felt when looking into her eyes. Connie Keane was gone now. She was officially Veronica Lake. At the age of 17, in 1940, she would marry movie art director John Detley, who was 14 years her senior, and soon have her first child, Elaine, in 1941. While they were married, she was signed to Paramount, and her star continued to rise. She made classics such as Sullivan's Travels in 1941 and I Married a Witch in 1942. Though she was a wife, mother, and movie star, she was still very young. This led to insecurities which caused her to invent a toughness as well as begin to drink heavily. Both resulted in her being labeled as difficult. Sullivan's Travels with John McCrae is a role that cemented her as a Hollywood icon and for which she is best known for today. She was supposed to be in a follow-up movie with McCrae, but he was quoted as saying, "Life is too short to do two films with Veronica Lake." Veronica and John's marriage started to splinter as she became more famous. More Veronica Lake. He didn't like being referred to as Mr. Lake and wanted to know what had happened to his wife Connie, the woman that he fell in love with. His despair led him to the point that he wasn't there for her when she needed him the most. In 1943, while filming a movie and pregnant with her second child, she tripped over a lighting cable on set, causing her to fall, and then later deliver her son prematurely. John refused to come to the hospital to see his wife or his new son for several days. By the time he decided to come to the hospital, the baby had passed away. The couple would divorce soon thereafter in 1943. Her reputation for being difficult to work with intensified over the years. One co-star, Eddie Bracken, was quoted as saying, "She's known as the bitch, and she deserved that title." Part of her difficulties in Hollywood involved not wanting to be part of the Hollywood star machine and not wanting to be forced to maintain a certain image all the time. She wanted to be free to take on different and more challenging roles. However, Paramount wanted her to keep doing what they were sure was going to work. More heavy drinking and erratic behavior caused questions around mental illness. She would show up to the set hungover, not different from how many of the men would behave, but this was not acceptable for a female. Despite all of this, though, she was a huge star by 1942, and young women all over the country rushed to copy the peekaboo hairstyle. Unfortunately, this included women who were now working in factories while the men were away at war. At the urging of the US government, she changed her hairstyle during World War II to influence women working in factories to have more conservative hairstyles. This actually helped reduce hair-related injuries in the factories, but ultimately did a lot of damage to her career. She didn't mind it because she felt that being known for the peekaboo hairstyle was limiting, and she did not want to be put into a box. However, her career would soon be pretty much over. While not married, she dated notable men such as Aristotle Onassis, who would later marry Jackie Kennedy, and Howard Hughes, who would date basically every woman in Hollywood at that time. A year after her divorce from Detley, she would marry director André de Toth in 1944. They lived well for a while, she being an actress and him a director. They worked well together, and she even starred in some of his movies. However, as time went on, their lifestyle expanded faster than their income. They had multiple homes, a staff, and even an airplane. At the peak of her career, she earned $4,500 per week. For context, that's a salary of about $3.7 million a year in 2020 dollars. The success, however, wouldn't last forever. Lake's career began to falter when she played an unsympathetic Nazi in 1944's The Hour Before the Dawn. Not only was she playing a Nazi, but critics complained that her German accent wasn't convincing at all. Paramount began offering her fewer roles, Andre began directing less, and the money stopped coming in. According to her autobiography, Andre thought the less money one had, the more they should spend. He would take frequent trips without her and left her home alone to figure out how to pay the bills. At this point in her career, a lot of the offers had dried up as her reputation often preceded her. She was still contracted with Paramount but wasn't being offered many decent parts. She continued to drink heavily during this period, and more people refused to work with her. After a string of unsuccessful movies, even in smaller roles, Paramount decided to not renew her contract in 1948. She made Slattery's Hurricane in 1949 for 20th Century, but it didn't go anywhere, even though Veronica was very proud of that movie. The excess stress was not good for her marriage, and her drinking became more difficult for those around her to handle. Her husband described her as being like two people, one introverted and fearful, and the other reckless and raging. She would have a son, Michael with the Toth, and a daughter, Diana, a few years later. By the time she was in the hospital giving birth to Diana, they were in a dire financial situation. She wasn't working much, and either was he. All of this time, Veronica had been paying her mother support payments, but had to stop because, well, she just didn't have the money anymore. Veronica's mother sued her at the worst possible time for payment, and the case ended up being settled out of court. At this point, Veronica was forced to file bankruptcy, and the IRS took her home for unpaid taxes. After all of that, she was over it, over the marriage, over the life, over Hollywood. Soon after, she would leave Andre in Hollywood and head to New York. She would say years later, quote, "I had to get out. I was never psychologically meant to be a picture star," end quote. Once she got to New York, she received a few movie offers immediately. She then found out that while she was married, offers had been going to her husband, who turned them down on her behalf. However, at this point, she wanted to wash her hands of Hollywood altogether. She still decided to pass on those movie roles and pursued television and the stage. When she left Hollywood, Veronica Lake wasn't completely put away, but she was able to be Connie again and live a more simple life. She performed in small stage performances and made some television appearances in both New York and Florida. She did summer stock and other small roles, but it really gave her the chance to be able to do more of what she wanted to do. She liked acting, but didn't like being a movie star. While in New York, she was living in various apartments and cheap hotels, and was unfortunately arrested several times for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. However, she was making her way. In 1962, a New York Post reporter found her living in the Martha Washington Hotel for Women and working as a cocktail waitress in the lounge under the name Connie DeToth. She was quoted as saying she took the job because, quote, I like people, I like to talk to them, end quote. Is it really sad or just a person trying to live their life between acting roles? After the story was widely publicized, many people pitied her and speculated that she was destitute, and fans sent her money. However, I don't think she saw herself as destitute. She ended up sending the money back as a matter of pride. It wasn't that she didn't need the money, but she didn't want people's pity either. The story did help revive her career a bit with a few TV and stage appearances, though. In 1969, she traveled back to Hollywood for the first time since her divorce from Andre to receive her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She wasn't sure if she'd be welcomed back home to Hollywood, but I'm sure she did hope on some level that she would have some kind of fanfare upon her arrival. However, only two people were at the ceremony on Hollywood Boulevard that day. She immediately left Hollywood when the ceremony was over. Her autobiography was written later that year, and at that point she seemed happy and content. She talks about living in a small apartment, doing dinner theater productions in Miami, and generally being happy and living a simple life. She was able to pay her bills and live comfortably. She only had sporadic contact with her children, but she seemed okay with that too. She even talks in a hopeful manner about making the low budget Nazi myth film that would be her last, Flesh Feast. Basically, in the movie, Hitler isn't really dead, so she puts flesh eating maggots on him to kill him once and for all. Yeah. But taking a look at the resulting movie, you can see the effects that alcohol had on her, from her weight to her decaying teeth. However, you can tell that the talent and presence is still there. By 1971, her peekaboo hairstyle was long gone, and the years of alcohol abuse, failed marriages, career failures, menial jobs, and a lost child had taken their toll. She appeared on the Dick Cavett Show that year to promote her autobiography. The interview is a bit hard to watch as she struggles with her train of thought and to find her words. Cavett would later say that she was drunk during the interview. Shortly after that appearance, she would go to England to perform on stage, and she actually got great reviews for that performance. She would also marry her fourth and final husband at that point. She would leave him in 1973 and turned up in Vermont, where she would be hospitalized. She died on July 8, 1973, from cirrhosis of the liver and kidney failure. Her remains were unclaimed for 3 years as no one paid the cremation bills. In 1976, her autobiography's ghostwriter claimed her remains and dumped them off the coast of Miami per her wishes. I think in the end, Connie got tired of having to be Veronica Lake and pursuing a dream that wasn't even hers to begin with, but that of her mother. Even though she left Hollywood early, she didn't let anyone walk all over her or take advantage of her. For that, I think Connie would be proud of Veronica Lake.